Hello, dudes, dudettes, duders, and everything in between. Welcome to the Hollywood Fishbowl. I am your host, Jesse Kester. Today's guest is Kathie Fong Yoneda. She is an author, a script consultant. She's been an executive at major networks for years. She's a seminar leader, a workshop leader, and I don't like either of the terms seminar leader or workshop leader because I feel like two words are clumsy for that. So I'm going to call her a seminarizer and a workshopificator. Those are her jobs. Also, Kathie is an all-around mensch. And yes, I looked it up. Women can be mensches too, not just because it's 2018 and we're all woke, but because mensch just means human being. And she is. You heard it here first. Our guest is a human being, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But first, I wanted to do a quick plug. This episode of the Hollywood Fishbowl is brought to you by the Hollywood Fishbowl. And the best thing you can do for the Hollywood Fishbowl, since there's no subscription fee, there's no money involved, what you could do if you wanted to support us is swing on over to iTunes, leave a big fat 5-star review. That would make our hearts swim. But good Lord, if you went ahead and wrote a nice paragraph about how much you like this program, well, we'd just be over the moon at that point, and we'd be forced, nay, compelled to read that positive, glowing review on the air in future episodes. So, just go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that, because without our good sponsor, the Hollywood Fishbowl, it would be impossible to run the Hollywood Fishbowl. So we do ask that you go and support our sponsor. Let's talk about Kathie for a minute. Kathie is no longer in LA. She's retired to Fresno. Now, Fresno is a 3.5-hour drive out from here. So if I look a little beat in the video, if I sound a little beat in the audio, it's because, my friends, I'm a little beat. The drive out there, we did it all in one day. I drove out in the morning, did 2 interviews in Fresno, Kathie and her friend Sonia. Sonia will be airing at a later date, and look forward to that one because it is very good. And then I drove the 3.5 hours back. So it was a full day. It was an 8-hour day of driving plus the 2 interviews. So I'm still a little worn down. That's also why the episode is later than usual. But the drive through the desert, the drive in the morning, I swear it was 3 straight hours of grinning cheek to cheek on the way out there. I just love driving through the desert, and this trip out to Fresno was stunning. Drive home in the middle of the night, 3 hours of grinning. It was such a great experience to go out to Kathie's house, to meet Dennis, her husband, and to get a tour of their gardens. And I imagine that they might say that a tour of their gardens sounds a little overblown, but technically y'all did have 2 gardens. There was the Japanese garden and the Chinese garden, and you showed them both to me. So we're calling it a tour of the gardens. Now, there was there were many things that were special about this interview, but there was one thing that was particularly special and particularly meaningful to me in this whole trip out there and trip back. Let's back up a little. Let's take a look at the Fishbowl, which is brought to you by the Fishbowl, and let's look at the macro instead of the micro. So the first 4 were on background extra-ing, and that was a decent miniseries. I really enjoyed that one, and it kind of kicked things off. It set the tone for this whole program. The second capsule was 4 episodes on burlesque, and our numbers went up a lot. Apparently, burlesque is a hot topic. It's highly searchable. It's got a very visual component to go along with the intellectual component that we explored on air. So there's good content for the social media, lots of sharing, lots of liking, lots of following from burlesque. Then we do something a little more heady, a little more grounded, this storytelling series. It's not so whiz-bang fireworky. It's more something to think about while you're driving, or, just a little food for thought, I guess the expression is. Anyway, our metrics didn't plummet, but we definitely saw a plateau in growth from burlesque to storytelling. We didn't grow as much in the storytelling series as we did in the burlesque series. So I start to look at the whole project, and I wonder if this, the kind of this general interest I have in general things generally is to the detriment of the podcast. If it's going to end up hurting us more than helping us, it's kind of where my heart is headed. I'm not saying this is where I'll be in 30 years, but this is where my heart is headed these days, and it seems to be a really good fit for the life I'm living out here in LA. But the numbers were not really bearing that out, that we had stumbled on something that was that was a good build, a good product. And that maybe it would have been wise to stick to one topic specifically, like do a podcast on burlesquing or do a podcast on script analysis, or try to hone it a little more and focus it from episode to episode a little more than we've done. Anyway, this was heavy on my mind driving out to Fresno. This has been heavy on my mind through the whole storytelling series, which we're wrapping up today. Anyway, I chat with Kathie, and you'll hear this throughout the conversation, and it really is. You'll see how thoroughly it integrates into her worldview and her life experience. Kathie has also been blessed with the curse of general interest in general everything generally. You'll hear her talk about that more in her own words, and it seemed to pay dividends for her, creatively, professionally, socially, spiritually, intellectually. It seemed to work out. So it was really good to have this conversation at this juncture as we're coming to the end of the storytelling series, and I'm looking at the metrics. It was good to have this conversation and to have like a renewed bit of momentum that I wasn't expecting, and it was momentum that I wasn't expecting to lose either. I didn't see it coming. But to lose the momentum and then to get some of it back really meant a lot. So I want to say a sincere thank you to you, Kathie, for coming on, for living the life that you lived, and for sharing it with us. I hope that it's as meaningful and inspirational for our audience as it was for me. And that's a pretty high bar to clear, knowing that these ideas hit right in the moment that they needed to hit. These new paradigms, they were really, they were being exposed to me right when I was most hungry for them. So thank you so much. And without any further ado, I give to you, Kathie Fong Yoneda.
Drops.
Morpheus is fighting Neo. Nailed it. Welcome to the Hollywood Fishbowl. I am your host, Jesse Kester, and today I am joined by the one, the only, the illustrious
Kathie Fong Yoneda.
Welcome to the party. It's so good to have you on. The music is about to burn down. You don't have headphones on, so you don't know what blasting noise is in my headphones.
I'll imagine it.
Dance, 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 and Morpheus is done fighting Neo.
Oh, okay.
So how are you?
Did Neo win?
It's not whether he wins or loses.
It's how
he grows.
Yes.
How we like to start this program off is we do a 5 and 5. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you'll have about 1 minute to answer each question. And we just burn through some of the kind of simpler questions as quick as possible.
Okay.
And you're going to hear some beeping, and that'll be the countdown to the end of your minute. We good?
Okay.
Let's see what happens. That's loud enough. We can hear it. First question is, where did you grow up, and how did that inform your adulthood?
I was born and raised in Sacramento, California, and I have lived my whole entire life in California. Living in Sacramento is very much like it was for the heroine in Lady Bird. So if you've ever seen that movie, it gives you a good idea. It's like a pretty conservative town. And certainly when I was growing up many, many, many years ago, there was not the kind of emphasis on film and television in the media as there is now.
You got 20 seconds on the clock. You can keep going.
Oh, okay. I think the closest thing to it is that when I was growing up, one of the things I was always fascinated is that I always asked questions, which made me a really good journalist. My dad always remembered that he says, I'm sure your first words out of your mouth are mama or dad, but all I can remember is, how come, daddy? Why, daddy? So I was always there with questions.
We'll get back to all that. I've got follow-up questions for that one. Question number 2. What is the must-engage media, the book, the movie, the album that everyone should listen to before they die?
Oh, goodness. Geez, that is really a difficult question because it's one of those things, I guess.
And it can be for you. But what's your favorite thing, I guess, is the gentle way to ask that.
Well, I think when it comes to music, I have to say I love the Beatles' music, and it's evocative of the time period that I grew up in. I love the fact that no two songs are alike. Every dang album is different from the next one.
Each one is a full-blown concept album. Which is yours? Revolver, Sgt. Pepper? Where do you land on all of it? What's the one that...
The one with Norwegian Woods.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, you're doing fine so far. We've got 3 more questions.
Okay.
Number 3, what is your purest joy? What makes your heart swim the most in this world?
I think, well, being married to my husband is one. And I think I happen to have 3 of the most wonderful sisters in the world. And I really cherish my friends and family. That's the most important thing to me in my life.
How long have you been married?
44 years.
Holy moly, congratulations.
Thank you.
I have many, as a, not 5 years I've been married, I do have questions about longevity and how you invest in that.
Is this going to be in the interview, or do you want this for another session?
We might touch on it. And kids?
No kids. We have cats, though.
Okay.
Cleo and Minx. I have to mention them.
Cleo and Minx, shout out. Next question. What gets under your skin?
Oh, we already covered that.
What could it possibly be?
What gets under my skin is...
And let's see how diplomatically we can do this one.
Is when the political climate gets to the point where people accept lies or accept untruths and throw blame on everything else for the mistakes or the errors that they make.
Lack of accountability, lack of people taking responsibility.
Yeah. We can go on and on.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on all of those. And I think it will be an exercise we do later on in the program, is how diplomatically we can talk about these things. Because I've got opinions.
Oh, well, that's good. Everybody should have opinions.
You're doing fine. We got one more question. Are you ready?
Okay.
What is the last question? Advice for beginners. What's for people who are trying to break into film or break into writing? What do they need to know?
That it doesn't happen overnight, and that you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. You have to make mistakes, and if people think that everything is perfect the way it's written or perfect the way that they've done it, they're in for a big shock. You have to make mistakes because that's the way you progress and move forward. So that's the best advice that I can give people.
Now, follow-up question. What if you don't want to be patient?
Then maybe this isn't the industry for you.
Rats. There's no shortcut around learning patience.
Well, you know what? There's no shortcut to success. You know, I do understand that sometimes, people are born into a family that is already successful or something, and maybe that's the way to do it. But heck, none of us are. A majority of us are not born into a family where you have success laying there at your feet or it's inherited.
Well, can I disagree with you a little bit, just a little bit on that? Mm-hmm. I think the problem with being born into it is that you're blind to what you've been blessed with from birth. There are legs up on competitions that I was unaware of until I became intellectually and romantically entwined with Kenyan. And I saw the world through her eyes, and I've seen her home country and realized that I couldn't know what I was born into because I was born into it. It was apparently something dinged, but so I think everybody has colossal advantages that they're just simply unaware. Is that possible, or am I way off the mark?
No, I do understand what you're saying, though. I mean, we're as we go through life, that's one of the things is that I love being able to meet different people and listening to what they have to say or what their background is or what some of their trials and tribulations are. I think it's important that we realize that there's not just one way to live a life. Mm-hmm. And that's the important thing, is that we all have to learn through our mistakes. You have to make mistakes in order to have progress in your life.
Now, did you start in journalism or? Well,
that was. I mean, I have loved journalism since I was in junior high and high school, and I was on the school paper. Mm-hmm. And when I was in college, my major was art and journalism.
Okay. Did you break any big stories in high school?
You'll laugh when I tell you.
Oh, you did?
Okay, the biggest thing is that I was part of C.K. McClatchy High. Mm-hmm. Shout out to everybody there in Sacramento. And they had a little place called the Lion's Den, because that was our mascot was a lion. And the Lion's Den was a place where they sold food for lunch, but only guys went in there. It was just the guys who went in there because it was right next to the men's or the boys' gym.
Yeah.
And so I just asked my journalism teacher, I said, I'd like to do something on the Lion's Den, and I'd like to go in there and interview people and find out what's going on in the Lion's Den. And he just looked at me and he said, okay, go for it. And so I did. I walked in there and nobody said anything about it. And it turned out it was one of the better articles that I did. And actually, the guys all sort of looked at me funny, like, why is there a girl in here? But I started asking them questions. And when they found out that I was doing an article for the school paper, they all wanted to be interviewed. So
why was it all guys? Was it just that once it's mostly guys, then the girls are going to drift somewhere else and it becomes 100% guys? Or was it?
All I know is that only guys went in there. And I think it was because it was next to the boys' gym.
Proximity.
But I just always wondered, why is it that I can't go down there and get a hot dog or a hamburger or something if I wanted to? And so it's just that nobody ever tried it.
Yeah.
Well, I did.
So you did break something in high school.
I did.
And then you go to college and you study journalism and art. Mm-hmm. Why? When does the art hit? Like what's that impulse?
I just have always had an appreciation of paintings and statues, and I just and I guess that it's the history too behind art. I loved the stories that came out of it, and I had some really good teachers, I think, in art, and that's what's sort of stimulated it.
A good art teacher in high school, junior high school, can change the course of your life.
I totally agree. In fact, a couple of the teachers that I then later had when I went to community college.
Shout out to community college. My mother and I both are community college folk.
Well, first of all, I was not allowed to go to a four-year college yet, unless I wanted to go straight to Sacramento State College.
Was that your parents saying?
I think they just felt that it was better to go to the community college first, and I was fine with that. And
I mean, you're getting a lot more bang for your buck at a community college.
Oh yeah, and also too because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is that after 2 years of community college, I still was not quite sure what I wanted to do. And I was a little rebel. And I ended up moving down to Los Angeles. And I went to California Fashion Institute, which is now FIDM, Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. And I thought, okay, I kind of wanted to use my artistic skills for things like fabric and designing. And it turned out that it didn't work out that way for me. And I left design school and I had to support myself. So what did I do? I went and got into, I went to the studios, I went to Universal, and I wanted to get a job. And the guy that I was dating at the time told me, well, they they are looking for people, they need secretaries or assistants or typists and stuff. So why don't you go there? At least it's a union and you'll get paid more.
Yeah.
So I did, and I got the job. And only about a month or two later did I find out I was hired because I was Asian. I was the first Asian female hired full-time at Universal Studios.
Now, was it like an affirmative action type hire, or was it we think you're good at this thing because you're Asian?
It was basically
or a little bit of both.
It was affirmative action, I think.
Okay.
A lot of it was because I didn't know at the time, but the federal government, was upset with the motion picture television industry because less than 0.1% of their workforce, full-time workforce, were minorities. 0.1%.
If you had said 1%, that would have been a bad number.
No,
but
1/10 of 1%. So I got the job as a typist in the typing pool. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I didn't understand at the time. I mean, I honestly didn't even know any of this until some gal came up to me who was also in the typing pool. And she got very upset and said to me, my girlfriend was supposed to get that job. And I said, why? I think I was hired fair and square. And she said, well, you only got it because you're Chinese. So I was a little curious about this, and I went down to Human Resources and asked the woman who did the interview about this. And she said, yes, it's true that the industry is being hounded about they need to hire more people. But she said, to me, you were the best candidate by far. You typed great. You had wonderful social skills. And she said, I would have hired you even if I were blindfolded.
That's what I'm talking about, being blind to privilege, is when it's 0.1% and people are still pissed off that you occupy that much of the spectrum. That's being blind to privilege. You have 99.9% of everything.
Oh God, I used to walk around the lot, and I could walk around for almost a whole week, and it'd be hard for me to find a person of color. Except for there was one guy in the mailroom, and he was African American, and so we used to make a joke about it. How many did you see today?
God bless humor. God bless people who are willing to go down that route. So you start as a typist. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you worked your way up the ladder. You didn't finish as a typist, did you? You want to get into that a little bit?
Sure. I still didn't know what I wanted to do even then, but I just needed to have a job. But I became very interested in everything about the industry. I started to learn more. And I think that was, in a way, that job starting at the bottom was a blessing for me, because I had to learn everything as I worked my way up. Yeah. I had to figure things out and how things fit together. Once you start doing that, you have a much better understanding of why certain decisions are made, why there are certain policies that a company might have. This tells you about something that I always tell people to do, and that is, when you network with people, it really helps to start building bridges for you. The head of Warner Brothers at the time said that he needed some help because he was chairing this great big charity function for breast cancer. And so one of the gals, his secretary, asked me, Kathie, can you help me out? Because we need some help stuffing these envelopes and the invitations. So I was doing that, and I noticed, oh, it's a date. I'm not doing anything that evening. So I said, well, if you need help, I can help that evening. And so they said, well, we need help with the silent auction table. In fact, we need a few more people. So I called up some of my other friends who were also, in about the same level that I was. And we were at the charity function and helped with the silent auction. And it just still bowls me over because it was totally unexpected. About a week later, 10 days later, Mr. Ashley, the guy who was the head of the studio, called me and he said, Kathie, first of all, thank you for helping me out. I really appreciate it. He said, we have a new vice president coming in, and I would like to recommend you for the job as his secretary. And of course, it paid a lot better and everything. And I was just like floored. That man, the new vice president coming in, was a man named Richard Shepard. He became my mentor. He had been an agent, and before that, he had been a producer. In fact, he produced one of my all-time favorite movies, which is Breakfast at Tiffany's. So,
it's fairly well known, that one. It's done the rounds.
Yeah. So I worked for him, and he eventually was. I don't know how to best to describe this. Okay, what happened is that the head of Warner Brothers, Mr. Ashley, was removed from, he was retiring actually, and someone else came in, and that person wanted to put his own people in. So they moved my boss to become a producer and gave him a producing contract instead. What was great is that I learned a lot more because he became a producer again. And one of the first things that he did was Robin and Marian, which is a classic movie which talks about what happened to Robin and Marian when they got older. And it starred Audrey Hepburn and Sean Connery. And they were trying to get Audrey Hepburn out of retirement because she would not do it. She had her 2 boys, and she was I think she was going through a divorce at the time, and she just didn't, she really wasn't sure she wanted to go back into the whole thing of doing movies. But because she had had such a wonderful time working with my boss on Breakfast at Tiffany's, then she said, okay, fine, I'll do it. While he was in Spain shooting the movie, all the scripts were piling up that were being sent to him from all these different agents, and I was bored, so I started reading them. And that's when he came back, he started picking up one script, and I said, oh, you don't want to read that one, it's not very good. So he picked up another one. I said, oh, that one's even worse. He finally said, how many of these did you read? And I said, all of them. There's probably about 30, 40 scripts. And he just said, well, do me a favor. Can you just, write a little paragraph about what it's about, and 1 or 2 paragraphs about what you like or did not like about it. And I did. And he's the one that recognized that I really had a very keen eye at being able to discern what was good or bad about the story, and how stories could be changed. And it was something that I thought, oh, well, I always got A's when I did my book reports. So that's what I was using. I was using those skills.
So it sounds like a mix of being a good person and being a good person.
I think it's being able to take what skills that you've got and put them to the best use possible. And in this case, I thought, oh, that's easy. I've done this before. I've done book reports before. Why not? But it's also knowing that I had an eye for detail. And I think that helped me tremendously. I really relished that. A lot of people like to just go for, okay, here's the broad strokes. I always like to get into, well, there's the broad strokes, but what's supporting them? What are the fine details that are going to make those broad strokes really stand out? And so eventually he moved over to Warner Brothers, and he became the head of production, and he says, we're moving over there. And I negotiated my first deal with him, and that is, I said, okay, how about I agree to go over, and I'll help you train and find somebody who can, take my place. What I'd like to do after that is I would like to have 30 days in the story department as an analyst, a story analyst, which is a reader. And it's a union position. And in order for you to be in that union, you have to work for 30 consecutive days. It's really hard to get in. And even then, after you work those 30 days, you have to go through a series of, they have you read some material, and you have to do coverage and everything on it. And sometimes people pass and sometimes they don't. I was very fortunate that I passed my first time, but I've had friends in the union who had to go through like 3 or 4 times.
And if you don't pass, you got to do another 30 days. And if you don't pass, like you keep doing it from...
Well, a lot of times what the studio will do is if you don't pass that first or second time, they just say that's it.
Yeah, it's not
because
happening.
they can't continue to keep doing that.
Yeah. I got a question, a quick one about mentors. Like, it seems that how do you find one? How do you sort that out? Is it kind of the stars align and you get lucky, or?
I think that's a large part of it, at least in my case. I wasn't really sure what I was doing at that point. I thought, okay, I guess maybe I'll be a studio secretary forever or something.
Yeah.
But it turned out that...
Were you happy as a studio secretary? I mean, were you enjoying it? Was it... If you had been that forever, would you be smiling today still?
I don't know. It's hard to say because, my life is so different from probably what it would have been. I have to say, though, I mean, there certainly is a lot of enjoyment in being able to be working at a studio and to see a lot of famous people coming in and out and all that. But it's still a job. A job is a job, and it's not always easy to get those jobs. And more importantly, it's not always easy to keep those jobs because everything changes at the top and it filters down.
Yeah. You can lose your job. You can lose your project for things that have nothing to do with your behavior, your performance.
One of the other things I should have mentioned is, as a result, is when I moved up to become Richard Shepard's secretary, one of the gals who helped me out, I recommended her, and she got my old job.
So you do the 30-day program, and then you're switched over to mostly story consulting at this point, or? Well,
no. What happened is I was a story analyst for many years, and I eventually went over to Disney. Mm-hmm. And I went over to Disney because while I was at Universal at that time as a story analyst, one of the gals over there who was a VP was a gal named Jane Rosenthal, who now takes care of Robert De Niro's company. Mm-hmm. And she always liked the work that I did. And she went over to Disney as their new VP. And she called me up and she just said, we need to get a couple of new people over here in the story department. Would you be interested in coming over? Because I think you've got the kind of work ethic that they need, because they had a lot of people who were used to just reading things that were very Disney-esque.
Yeah.
And the people who were there in charge now were Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. They were given the opportunity to be able to add on and enhance the Disney image. So it wasn't just all cartoons and kid stuff.
Yep.
They wanted to make it family fair, but they also wanted to have a different division that would also be able to include PG-13 and R-rated material as well.
What was it
was called Touchstone.
Touchstone, that's what it was. I was thinking of the logo at the beginning of Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, it was Touchstone Pictures. Yeah. So she asked me to come over there, and I did. And what happened is they got stuck. Jeffrey Katzenberg came over and asked her, we've had this writer do a rewrite on this script twice, and we just can't quite crack it. There's just something here. We need a fresh pair of eyes. So could you have one of the story analysts take a look at it? So Jane had me do it, and I had never done notes before. And I was kind of intimidated by it. I said, oh my God, I have to do it for these people. But then I figured, what the heck? And she said, just look at it this way. Think about, because I had never done notes. I said, what do I do? And she said, well, what would you do if you could talk to the writer, talk to the author?
Yeah.
What would you say to them about what you liked or didn't like about it and why? And that's what I did. So I did like 6-7 pages of notes, and evidently they were pretty good because
did it go into production? Is this something that might be known?
Uh-huh.
Or can we know what it is, or is it? Can you write it down and slip me a piece of paper?
It was one of the first ones that I did. It was it's called Outrageous Fortune.
Okay.
Yeah, with Bette Midler.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, it was really interesting because like a week later, Jane Rosenthal says, Jeffrey wants to talk to you, so you need to come over here this afternoon at 4:00. So I did, and he tossed the script back, my notes and my script back to me, and he says, that's pretty damn good. He says, we want you to start next Monday as an executive.
So how do you celebrate that? What do you do in that moment? That's not a bad offer.
No,
you go out for the weekend, or you just...
Well, because it was, I only had like a weekend. Mm-hmm. I had never been to New York. Mm-hmm. So we celebrated, and we just took off and went to New York for a couple of days.
Okay, at least you had the presence of mind to celebrate. That's so good.
Yeah.
So then now you're an executive at Disney.
Mm-hmm. And I was there for several years. Then for a while, for about a year and a half, I left Disney and worked for Island Pictures, and I was a VP over there. But it turned out that it was not exactly, I thought it would be an opportunity for me to learn another way of how to get a movie made, because it was more of an independent film company. And I thought that it would be something for me to learn a lot more about it. But it didn't quite work out the way that I thought it would. And so I moved back to Disney, and I thought, I'm just as happy being a story analyst. So I just went back there as an analyst, not expecting anything else, until I went to have lunch with one of my friends, who at that point was an executive over in the TV animation division. And so she asked me, to come back afterwards, and we were talking and everything. And it turned out the guy who was the head of the TV animation department remembered me when he used to go to the creative meetings. And he used to ask me questions about different writers, and could I recommend some writers, for television. And I would do that. And because I was nice enough to recommend those things and to help him out, he remembered me, and he said, I thought you were working for Island Pictures. And I said, oh, no, I left them. And he said, well, I want you to work for me. So I worked in TV animation for a couple of years.
Which shows were you on?
Oh, my God. You would have to love all the Disney things, like, there were things like DuckTales and, Little Mermaid. The TV version of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I got a passing familiarity with these series.
Mm-hmm. Goof Troop.
Okay. I'm going on mic. I'm saying this on wax. A Goofy movie is one of the most underrated films in the history of cinema. That thing went under the radar kind of is offensive to me. It's so good. What was I thinking? Now I'm totally derailed. Well, through all these projects, are there any that you like stand out as ones that you're really proud of, that you feel like you had, that your kind of your DNA, your touch was on it, and that it was something that was really special to you as you were working on it or looking back?
Gosh, that's a hard question. I do think I did a good job in trying to get Little Mermaid author, because it was the first really big Disney film that they were allowing to be made into a television weekly cartoon series. Yeah. And so I think part of it is that because I had such a good history with the Disney parent company, and especially growing up with a lot of the Disney work, I was so familiar with it. And that was one thing, is they kind of wanted to keep part of that, but they also wanted to grow their other division. So I had sort of my feet in both areas, and I also had more than a nodding acquaintance of animated material. So I think they appreciated the fact that I had seen a lot of the original Disney animated movies. Yeah. No. Also, that Little Mermaid, that was like a really important turning point in Disney's in the studio story is that film. So that's a heck of a property to be partnered, like to be able to have your. I also got to work on Who Killed Roger Rabbit. That's that film. I don't have to proselytize for that one. Goofy movie, I do, but
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That one is well known to be a classic. Did you get to work with or meet or talk to like Alan Menken at all?
Oh yeah, just very briefly.
Okay.
But actually, the relationship that I still have nowadays, whenever I go to Boston, I go to visit the guy that wrote the original book.
That's very cool.
And he's just a very dear friend, and we always get together. And he's the one guy that he enjoyed working with me so much that he actually got me a Jessica Rabbit pin with Swarovski jewels on it.
Whoa!
And I still have that to this day.
That's awesome. Do you think we can get a photo of that afterwards of you?
Oh, okay, I'll have to look for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll after the program, not right now. So the big question that's on my mind, we're doing the series on storytelling and screenwriting, is I think a lot of I fancy myself a bit of a writer. Mm-hmm. There's the whole process of writing, and then there's the whole, not secondary, but it feels secondary if you're writing, the process of kind of communicating that and bringing your ideas into an executive room. And I kind of wanted to get your take, your view on how to best repackage yourself from writer to pitchman, or repackage your writing from passion project to possibly developable property.
Well, the best piece of advice that I can give you is don't stop with just one script.
Okay.
The biggest question that they are going to ever ask you is, what else do you have?
Yep.
And that's two things that they want to know. They want to know that you are not a one script wonder.
Yep.
And they want to know that you are somebody who is taking this seriously, and that they can count on having more and probably maybe even better projects than what you've shown them. This is true not only when you talk to producers or to studio execs, but more importantly to agents or managers, because they're the ones that have to do the bulk of the selling of you and your material.
Okay. And how do you what are the best ways to kind of commit suicide in a meeting?
Whoa. I guess expecting too much.
I've done that. What else have you got? But you can understand how that happens when you're walking in. You like as the writer who doesn't even have an agent or a manager, you're thinking like, this person has all the answers, and if they just gave me some of the answers, even if you're realistically not going to get any of the answers in that first meeting, you can understand where that
well, I think
comes from.
one of the big mistakes that a lot of writers will make is when they come in with their into their first meeting, and if granted, hopefully maybe I've had a chance to read some of their script, or they've pitched most of it to me, and if I find that there might be something in the storytelling that doesn't quite work, and if I bring it up, and for them to get very defensive, or for them to say, but that's the best part, or that's the way it really happened, especially if it was...
Oh, that one's the worst. That's how it really, like, don't hide behind that.
Go, but that's what really happened, or that's what they really said. And it's sort of, when you become that defensive about it, and it shows that you're so... I guess in a way that you are so rigid about not wanting to be working as a team.
Yeah.
Because all movies end up being a team effort.
Yes. Here's the thing. Can I let me do the worst thing and do exactly what you said?
Go for it.
Do. I got this script, and it's about a young girl, maybe 11, 12 years old. And at the end of the story, she dies. The whole point of the story is that she dies. And I have had people say, well, why can't she just not die at the end? And my feeling then is, well, then that's a different script. We can do a script where the characters don't die at the end. Is there any situation, like from the ground up, that script was only about this one thing, and that was an unfair death in the world? Or should I just how do you navigate that conversation when the whole point really is the one thing that they want you to change? What's a good?
Well, it just depends. If they are paying you to do a rewrite, try it their way and see what happens, because you are being paid.
Okay.
See, so that is what the best advice I could give on that
very
part.
Fair on that.
And if they might actually recognize after they see the rewrite that it doesn't really work.
Okay.
And then
so just keep the conversation moving. Don't stonewall it if you possibly can. And then what are some ways that writers could better understand the studio, the mechanics of the studio, the internal workings of the studio? So when you write a script, the only restriction is whatever you want to be thinking about at that time that you write it. But when a studio produces a script, they're factoring in a million other things that the writers are never thinking about, but could have no way to even be aware of it. So if you're going into, just for example, you're going into a meeting with Disney, it's the late 80s, they're trying to get Touchstone off the ground, you're not aware that Touchstone exists. So you're writing for, Kid Disney, and they want to be developing projects for Touchstone. How do you engage that dialogue? How do you get to, what awareness can you have of the studio's mechanics?
I think that the important thing is nowadays, especially with social media, there are things that you can look up that tell you a little bit more about what is being done. Especially if you go to the Hollywood Reporter and Variety, they have those kinds of things on their website, or if you actually have a paper subscription, because a lot of people still do.
Well, Variety is a fun one to get in paper. It's so beefy.
It's so beefy, and it's so full of commercials and ads and stuff. But no, it's but reading that can give you a better idea of what the studios are looking for. And also it ranks all the movies for that particular week, who sold the most tickets, or which TV shows were in the top 10. And it gives you an idea of what people are looking at now, and what is it that you could do that might be in that ballpark, but something that's a little bit catchier or a different take on it. Because they don't want you to, because people don't understand that once you see a movie, that movie was conceived probably a couple of years before that. It's taken like a year and a half, 2 years before it gets to the screen. And same thing for television. It takes a while before a series actually gets made and is up there. So you have to really kind of think ahead. If you don't have anything already written, think about, what do I see and what can I do that's going to make it different from that?
Here's a very specific question, and you can opt out if you want on this one, but what do you we got the bell ready to go. What do you think is that juice that is in Billy Wilder's work that makes it feel like it was written yesterday, or even there's something about his films that when I watch them, I feel like it's still on the cutting edge of thought and compassion, human complexity. What is that? What is that?
He writes the best characters, and his dialogue is just spot on. And it's because he takes everyday people. It's just one of those things. He's a great observer of life, and I do think that is one thing that I think people need to, especially writers. It's important to really observe the world. I mean, I think it's great some of the best writers, when when I've talked to some of them, they say that some of their best things they do is they just sit around and they listen to people. They'll sit in a bus station or an airport.
Oh, yeah.
Or Vegas or on a plane.
I haven't done Vegas yet. Amtrak, the trains are great for listening into other conversations.
Well, on the subways.
Yes.
And just listening to that's life. That's real life. And yet there's drama and there's humor on there. And it's some not so nice things that are happening. But, it's it's being able to observe and absorb what you see around you, and what is it that affects you in such a way that you feel compelled to write about that subject and that particular character that is the one that's responsible for saying the words that you want them to say. And that's what made Billy Wilder so great.
And there's really no shortcut to that, as far as I can tell. To people watching, like there's no Twitter feed in the universe that can supplant going out and sitting at a coffee shop or sitting on an Amtrak and listening in to whatever else is actually happening in other people's.
Maybe it's because I am older and I'm not a millennial. I think that's one of the things, is that speaking skills and dialogue are missing in a lot of the projects that I've been reading. And that's because they allow social media to do their talking, or they just talk very briefly to do their text or something. And they aren't really listening to what other people are saying when it's one-on-one. And they have to remember that that's what's the important thing, is when you're sitting there in a theater, or you're sitting on your and watching television, or even watching your computer while it's streaming, these are people that are characters that are talking back and forth. You have to be able to write those characters and what they're saying. And you can't just have them being on social media all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, that is a major problem. I was talking to a couple of people in HR at the studios, as well as some other folks too that work for some high-tech companies. And one of the biggest problems they have is that some of the younger people coming up, those that are mostly they're the ones who are under 30 or so, don't have the social verbal skills to be able to really express themselves and to be able to write down what it is that they feel or they want their characters to feel or to say. So,
to be fair, in their defense, when it wasn't until I was in my late 20s, early 30s that I feel like it takes some time to familiarize yourself with emotions and how they explode out of you and ricochet off of other people and come back. Mm-hmm. So we could cut them a little slack. I'm not saying they're off the hook completely, but it takes a minute. You listen to Leonard Cohen, he was doing his best stuff at 70, 80.
True.
It took a while to get to the really good. Not that it was ever bad, it was always good, but let him marinate a minute.
Well, it's just that I also think that sometimes the millennials do expect things to happen very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the way that it's always going to work. Just because we can get information quickly doesn't necessarily mean that mentally, physically, and emotionally that we can absorb all of that and put it out there in a script or in a novel.
Yeah.
It's not always that easy. And you do need a certain amount of, I think, experience in what you do with your life and what you see and feel, because that's sort of what helps move you along. I know that these people in HR just have told me, sometimes it's really hard to have a conversation when they're asking questions and they just answer yes or no.
Yeah.
And they don't take the time to really discuss a little bit more about some of their skills and some of the, okay, let's see. Oh, I see you're familiar with the program, and they'll say yes. Instead of saying, yes, I used to put together an article that I used for such and such, college paper or something.
Yeah.
It's being able to engage the people and not just expect that whatever's listed on your resume is going to do it for you.
Yes. There's a similar thing, if I can complain about these millennial children for a minute. And it's not even their fault. It's that I talk to people 20, 22 years old and ask them if they've ever felt heartbreak, and they think they have, but they haven't yet. And I can't relate to somebody whose heart hasn't been... I have trouble relating to people if their heart hasn't been broken, if they haven't felt like a deep, searing pain. But that gets complicated because everybody... the most pain you've ever felt in your life, you think that's the most pain.
At that time, yeah.
And that's the disconnect I feel mostly is, and it takes a minute to have your heart broken because you have to know who you are, and it's hard to know exactly who you are at 20 years old or 22. So you have to know who you are, then you have to give that self to someone else or something else, and then that something else or someone else has to absolutely own it first and then reject it second for that bridge to be built between. Does that make any sense, or am I off the rails completely?
No, I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. It's I think it's really, I do think it's kind of hard sometimes for when you're young, you haven't had that body of experiences to draw from. But I do think that there is some kind of a disconnect in some of the younger people coming up because they have relied so much on things like computers and social media. And of course, in social media, everything is very abrupt, or everything's limited to a certain amount. So it's not really being able to explore things and to really describe things thoroughly.
It's hard to do the deep dive in 140 characters.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Do you want to ding the thing? We can get into the bowl.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I have to ding it first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our fans wait for that sound effect at the edge of their seat the whole episode.
Do you want here? How's
there
that?
It is.
Okay.
Do you like that, Selena? What did you get? And you can ask me, or you can answer it yourself.
What are people like back home?
What are people like back home? Whose is that? Can I see? I might be able to recognize the handwriting. I'm not sure whose that is. But what are people like back home?
You mean in Sacramento?
All we have is what the card says.
Well, right now we're sitting in my home, so that's why. Well, my husband's upstairs, but so.
I don't know. I'll answer this for you. People back home seem pretty nice. I enjoyed talking to your husband, and I'm enjoying talking to you.
People in Sacramento, first of all, they are all going bonkers over Lady Bird because it's the first time that Sacramento's actually been an actual character. She talks about being in that city, and I have to say I related very well to that movie because I felt the same way she did, that I felt there was a disconnect because everybody there goes into civil service and everything's done a certain way, and it's the capital of the state, and so it's really mostly state, federal, county work. And I always knew I was meant to do something that was much more creative, I think. And so I always felt like I didn't quite belong in Sacramento. But I have to say, since Lady Bird came out, now everybody talks about Sacramento. And it's funny how some people will suddenly come up to me. Hey, wait a minute, aren't you from Sacramento?
That place is hot now. You got cachet.
Well, they are actually doing a film commission and actually getting more proactive about pursuing things, and it's a smaller town than Los Angeles or San Francisco or Fresno or whatever, but there still is sort of a small town atmosphere to it, which I kind of actually like sometimes, because I feel I can walk around there and everything is just sort of the way it was sort of when I was growing up. Sacramento, I have two sisters who still live there, and they are part of my lifeline. My other sister lives in San Francisco, and my sisters are truly my absolute best friends, as well as my life.
Older, younger, how are?
I'm the oldest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you help raise them? Are you old enough to have been a part of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My sisters are the people that I love the most in this world. Of course, Denny's probably upstairs saying, "What did you say?"
Yeah, he's got a cup to the door right now.
No, they're the ones who know me best.
Yeah.
good, bad, and indifferently. But
Well, I'm going to let it hang. Selena, do you think I love you more or less than Swinky? I'm not answering that question. Please continue.
But there's something to be said about Sacramento. I do appreciate, and I think it took a while for me to come to this point where I do appreciate having grown up there, because it's the same kind of thing, is that it challenged me. That if I didn't agree or I didn't like what the way things were, to move. And back then, especially for an Asian gal, to move out from your family and not going to college or anything, but just to move out and to move to a 400 miles, 500 miles away. That was kind of not done normally. But it was something that I felt I needed to do, and it was a little rough at first, I think. Like all things, I'm sure the same thing for you when you moved to Tokyo. you feel it. It's just like, I'm not so sure, did I do the right thing or not? But then you gradually realize, well, wait a minute here. If I don't start trying to make decisions, and if I make a mistake, learn from it, then I'm not going to move anywhere. I won't progress. I'll just move backwards, and I didn't want to ever do that. And so I do think that, the fact that I had the courage, like Lady Bird did, to just, okay, I'm just going to move out, and I'm going to do what I need to do and find out what the rest of the world is like beyond what my family has given me.
I think I just moved to LA half a year ago. That was... So, okay, when I moved to LA, I had a career in Tokyo. I have a wife. I had a life. I had income. I had a network. I had a reputation. When I moved to Japan from America, I had a backpack, and I had some underwear, and I had some shirts. So I'm feeling it much, much more on this move than when I moved to Tokyo, because it was just out of college. Who cares? You're invincible at that age, and now I'm feeling it deeply. Lady Bird. Mm-hmm. I go to Redbox 2 or 3 times a week just to rent a video, and every time since they've gotten it, I see it and I think like, oh, that looks like work. I haven't watched it yet, and now I'm deeply, deeply regretting my poor life decisions. So I would go with, Iron Man or whatever stupid movie, the Thor film. I'm going to dig myself out of this hole I'm digging. Let's see what we got down here. I'm not going to go for one of yours. I'm going to close my eyes and do this fair. Ooh.
That doesn't sound good.
This is really complicated. There's some, not double negatives, but this is a tough one.
I thought only 45 did double negatives.
These infinity negatives. That one. Ooh. Don't even. Because here's the thing. My man. If you're going to blow it on wood and wooden, maybe you're not ready for prime time. If that's really the story you're going with, go back to the lab. Do a little more studying. That's not the mistake we make when we're at that level. That just rubbed me. Because here's the thing. I freaking love words. I love words. And here's why I love words. Because they're free. You don't have to pay a damn thing to use whichever word you want. You can find the absolute best word, and it costs the same as the dumbest, stupidest word in the universe. What do we got down here? Is there another language or an accent that you can do for us? I don't know who wrote this. I'm imagining it's a performer or actor.
Oh.
Do you speak English?
English is my only language.
And here's a question. Slang from Sacramento when you were growing up. Is there any good slang that that as a boy growing up in Pennsylvania I wouldn't know?
Not really. Maybe some surfer slang or something like that. But that's about it.
Here's a more pointed question. So in Hollywood movies, there's like oh, whoa, dude, gnarly. Do those people exist, or was that just like a caricature for film?
Well, it still continues because everybody watched Big Wednesday or something, I guess. They watched all those surfer movies for a while.
But was that how people really talked back in the day, or was it just like
They did during the 60s, maybe, but...
Okay.
I really don't hear very many people talking like that now.
See, we could go shallow. We could totally just talk surfers in the 60s. Why don't you give it a ding? Let's keep burning this thing down.
Okay.
We're getting questions I've never had before.
Wow.
Some of these are new. What weirdo question did you get this time?
Ooh. Describe, I guess it's moment where you were obsessed with someone or something.
Ooh. We can get on that Keanu Reeves train if you want. Because that moment is still going for me.
No, obsessed with someone or something. I have to say, I was obsessed with Bruce Lee.
Really?
Yes.
What was the pull? Was it his films? Was it the Green Hornet? Like, what was...
There was just... And if you look in the mirror over there, yeah.
Oh.
The Green Hornet. I was obsessed with Bruce Lee right around the time I met my husband. And I have a funny story about that. He, the head of international distribution for Asia, was this gentleman who knew that I liked Bruce Lee. Mm-hmm. And so he was the one responsible for getting Bruce Lee to come over to take care of some stuff for publicity, and Enter the Dragon was about ready to come out. So he had Bruce Lee. He told him, please do me a favor. There's a young woman here who really loves your movies and really is excited, and she works here. And so he gave him the directions to get to my office, and he stuck his head in and said, "Hi, I'm looking for Kathie."
Oh my God.
And I just looked at it, I thought, oh my God, am I seeing things or what? And he turned out to be a genuinely nice person, and we just chatted, and he said that he was going to be doing another movie, or he was scheduled to do another movie, so he didn't know if he was going to try and be back for the premiere. But I got an autograph photo of him and everything, which you've seen. Mm-hmm. And a funny thing that came off of that is that I sort of lost my obsession, sort of. And that was because I started dating my husband. And the funny thing that happened is after a month or so after we'd been dating, he came to the studio to pick me up for a screening or something. And he saw Bruce Lee's picture on my desk. And it's, he's bare-chested, and it's from the scene, and he's doing his kung fu pose, and so, and my husband said, "Why do you have this guy's picture there?" I thought he was getting kind of jealous, and there was something kind of endearing though about that he did that, and like they say, 45 years later, here we are. But he's the one who got me off the obsession.
Let's do one more, and then let's get you out of here. Let's get you off the clock. Do you want to pull the last one?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Ooh, should I try to pick one of yours? Is this yours? What villain would you like to be and why?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Ooh. Which villain? Who would you go for? I got mine.
Maleficent.
Ooh, okay. Why?
There's a couple of reasons why, for me at least, because I think we now understand that sometimes We just don't know everybody's story behind them and why they turned out the way they did. Why was she mean? Why was she so cruel? Of course, when you think about it, those grim fairy tale people and Hans Christian Andersen and all of them, I don't know, they probably had some problems too. But what I liked about Maleficent is that I do know people who were like that, who were kind of not such nice people, and treated their stepkids not very well or whatever. But then I like the fact that that Disney decided, well, we're going to do a movie about Maleficent and how she was misunderstood. And so to me, that was something that I always kind of thought, that there is sometimes more than meets the eye to the villain. And maybe if we understood them a little bit better, then maybe we would be a little bit more understanding of why they turned out the way they did.
Excellent. I like that. Was a hell of a pull to go from to choose a villain and then make it an exercise in empathy.
Yeah.
Not bad at all. I can't take that from you. You had such a good answer for the villain and why. I'll tell you off mic, but we're gonna close on that one. Is that okay?
Okay.
Even if I could, I wouldn't upstage you on that one. And I can't. So I'm going to cue up the goodbye music, which you won't hear because you don't have headphones on. But you can imagine it'll be a nice surprise for you. You ready?
Well, thank you for having me.
This has been the Hollywood Fishbowl, and I have been Jesse Kester. I'll continue to be Jesse Kester. If you liked what you heard, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at HW Fishbowl. If you want to hear more of us on the internet, go to www.hollywoodfishbowl.com. But it's not about me, it's about our guest, Kathie. Should people be following you on the social medias? Is there somewhere they can find you?
Well, you're always welcome to follow me on www.kathiefongYoneda.com, KathieFongyoneda.com.
Anywhere else? Are you blowing up the Instagram?
Nope.
Okie dokie. And I would encourage all of our listeners to do the deep dive on Kathie, because thank you. Thank you for sharing your insight. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for being who you are. We have about 10 seconds left of the music, and that's why I'm kind of spinning my wheels a little bit right now.
Well, thank you very much.
And good night.